Hi, my name is Paul. I'm the owner and technician for Perryhill PC Guy, and this is our first video. Today we are going to be replacing the cooling fan on an HP Pavilion G7-2270US. Now, these older laptops, they're big, they're bulky, and they're a little bit more difficult to open up than your more modern laptops where you just take out the screws and split open the layers, but it's not that bad. It's just a bit of a longer process. So we'll start by flipping it over. Now, one thing to note, the disk drive in this model does not pull out. It is screwed in on the inside, so do not try to force it off. You will rip off the plastic cover. Now, with all laptops, if the battery is accessible, that is always the first thing that you remove, and rubber's a bit stuck here. It's always the first thing you remove. If it's not on the outside, you just remove it when you get to the inside before you unplug anything else. Now, we do have screws, 3 in the battery bay, here, here, and here. We have one here, 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 and here. We need to get rid of all of these. There's also a couple more under this panel, so we'll start with removing the panel. Shameless plug, LTT Screwdriver, very nice. Now, it has a clip right here where you can see release door. You want to pry up here and it just comes right off. Now, battery is out, so we can safely remove the RAM, which isn't strictly required, but it's good practice to do. Put that aside. We do need to remove the Wi-Fi card because that is actually attached to the bottom frame. So let's go ahead and get rid of that. We'll put that off to the side over here. And we also want to remove the hard drive. Now, with this customer, I am actually going to be upgrading him to an SSD later. It just hasn't arrived in the mail. But very simple, you just pop open the door, take this out, put the housing on the SSD, plug it back in, you're good to go. Move that over to the side. Now, we're good with removing components, we just need to get rid of screws. So, we'll start by removing this. Now, I believe this is actually the disk drive screw. Yes, it is. However, it is not strictly required that you remove it. And in fact, I don't recommend it because it does seem to have some kind of hooks on the side that are going to get caught and rip open its housing. And this does open without removing it. So, like I said, I would just leave it alone. So, yeah, and actually before I get too carried away, so disk drive screw here, that needs to go. There's another one here. There's a screw here for the keyboard, which does need to be removed. And there's 2 here, 2 here. So let's go ahead and get rid of all these. And like I was saying, opening up these older laptops, it's not hard, it just takes a bit longer. Oh, already got that one. That should be all of them, except for the keyboard. Now, these are all the same size screws, so you don't need to worry too much about losing them or mixing them up. They are all M.2.5 times, or rather by 1.6.5. Now, oh, right, before I flip it over, I need to get rid of the rest of the bottom chassis, so let me do that. Obviously, it's not going to open if I don't get rid of all the screws. Now, this is a bit of a unique laptop design because you don't actually really open it from the bottom. You open it from the top by removing the palm rest. The motherboard is attached to the bottom chassis. And I'm calling it a chassis, not a cover, because of how it opens. You'll see that when I actually get it open. But the motherboard is attached to the bottom chassis by a single screw on the inside. So once you do open it, it does get a bit flimsy. should be all the bottom screws. Let's just double check before we flip it over. And yes, that is all of them. So before we flip it over, what we actually want to do is we want to open it slightly. These two large holes are access holes for popping open the keyboard, because there's a couple more screws on the top side that we need to get rid of. They are under the keyboard. So let's go ahead, push that down. You'll know it's popped out because it'll suddenly give way and you'll hear a couple light snaps. Now we can flip it over. And we can see the keyboard's kind of bulging up here, so we just get that open. If you're having trouble popping it open, you can always use an opening pick, but this has already been opened before, so it's not the end of the world. And it just pulls out from the bottom. Unclip the flex. We are good to go there. So now we have a couple more screws here, 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 and here. Let's go ahead and remove those. And you can see I haven't actually cleaned this laptop yet. Fan is very dusty, very dirty. There will be a cut later on. That's just because I'm cleaning out the laptop. I'm not going to put it back together while it's still dirty, so that's all of the screws. Now, before we go about opening it up, we do actually want to unplug the connectors, because otherwise they'll start getting stuck on things. So let's go ahead and unplug this speaker here. Come on, there we go. We'll unplug this flex for the trackpad. And we will unplug this flex for the power button. At least, if I'm remembering correctly, this is for the power button. So now all of that's unplugged. We are ready to open this up. Now, it opens up on the side edges here. You can see the gap in between the palm rest and the bottom chassis. You can stick anything in there. I prefer the opening picks. You can just get it started. Now, the front and the sides, they actually come open pretty easily, but the back towards the hinges is where you start running into a couple complications. This is a bit of a weird design. If you want to avoid snapping the clips in the back, you're going to need something longer, a bit of a longer pry tool in order to stick it under there and get it. And I'll show you what I like to use. So now that we've got most of it detached, what we're going to do is we're actually going to open up the top, and we're going to take, I like to use these. You want to stick it in from the side and just slowly work your way under it. I've already opened this, so it's not as bad, but you want to slowly work your way under it and just release the clips. It especially likes to get stuck right over here by the fan. Not entirely sure why that is. My guess is it's just HP designs being weird. I know some of their older laptops were a bit strange. If you can't get it from the side, then what I found helps is you can actually attack it kind of from the back, or in this case it just comes right up, go figure. But yeah, this just pulls right off. Put that aside. And like I was saying, the motherboard is attached to the bottom chassis literally by this one screw right here, nowhere else. And in order to get to the fan, you do actually need to take the motherboard off, so we'll disconnect the display cable here. And we also want to disconnect this cable for this I/O daughter board here. We can disconnect the disk drive down here, and we should be good to go. It lifts up from the, there's one more cable plugged into a header on the bottom of the board. This is for the charge port. So now, lifts up from the right. You'll see the ports over on the left are kind of getting stuck in their housing. Lift it up slightly. Forgot to get the screw. Yeah, so as I was saying, lifts up from the right, pulls right out. Now we can move the frame over to the side. This is the motherboard. fairly big, bulky unit. Now, I have not actually removed this fan yet, so it might take me a second to figure out how it comes off. Figured I'd get this experience with you guys. So, if we're looking at this, I see. So in order to remove this fan, you actually need to remove the full heatsink assembly because part of its shielding is underneath the heat fin. So let's go ahead and do that. Now you can see over here, this motherboard does actually have other models that appear to have a dedicated GPU. Judging by the traces, it's probably, and the age of the laptop, it's probably one of NVIDIA's MX series accelerators. Could also be a 700 series GTX. Not entirely sure. Now this should be able to come off. I'm not entirely sure what we're getting stuck on here. Let's see if okay. Yeah, so it just gets stuck down. Looks like they've got some Captain tape on here, or some other kind of heat-resistant plastic shielding. Either way, looks like it's accumulated a lot of dust, so I'll be cleaning this off, possibly even removing it if I have to. But this is the fan. It is not a part of the what is it? It's not a part of the fin stack. All you do, these two screws here, let me actually put on a smaller bit so I can get them. These two screws here are for the shield. They are a part of the heat fins. You go ahead, you just unscrew these. You can't get to the other screw without removing the heatsink, which is unfortunate, but old laptop designs, go figure. Now the fan is clipped onto the shielding here. You can just peel that back, comes right off. Alright, we are back. I've given all the components, board, plastics, everything, bit of a nice little cleaning. Now, I've decided I'm going to leave this shield on. It is here for some reason. Not going to mess with it. I did get it as clean as I could, but it looks like a lot of that dust, grime, whatever, is just caked on. And I don't have a replacement film. It's not going to hurt it though. I blew off what was loose. Now, I need to get rid of this thermal paste because I'm going to have to repaste it. This laptop is, I believe, almost 10 years old, maybe older, so after removing the heatsink, definitely going to want to repaste it. Removing the paste, not that difficult. I use 91% isopropyl. You can use a lower percentage. This is just what I have. You might need to push down a little tiny bit. Don't push too hard or else you'll start knocking off the capacitors. Don't want to do that. You lead to instability. Might possibly not even work at all. So you definitely want to be gentle with it. Get this dry paste up. I want to get it out from in between the capacitors. It's not necessary, but a good quality job. You want to get rid of as much of it as you can. Then everybody's happy. Especially the board. Alright. Let's finish that off, give the die a nice little shine. So we'll be ready for new paste. Now, cleaning off the heatsink. Don't need to be as gentle with it. Let's go ahead and shine that up a little more, and I'll just let the alcohol evaporate. Move that over to the side. Let's clean off this sink real quick. Now, heatsink, it's just a copper plate. You don't have to be nearly as gentle. You can push about as hard as you want. You're not going to hurt it. You just want to get it nice and clean. Dry paste is not a very good thermal conductor. And if you try to put fresh, new paste over top of it, it will cause problems. Alright. Should be a good surface to work with. So now, let's go ahead and get our new fan out, get that installed. Jerry rig everything knife. Gotta plug that as well. Not affiliated with them or anything. I just really like their products. There it is, the new fan. As you can see, it doesn't come with the shield because it screws into it. So get this open. And let's get that installed. So it goes on like this. You can see these clips, they clamp down. If they don't snap in automatically, you might want to just push them in with your finger. It doesn't take a whole lot of force, you'll feel it click. We'll go ahead and we will screw it back into the plate. This doesn't seem to want to line up. Let's try that again on the other one. Huh. These are the same screws for the fan. I'm not sure why they don't want to screw them. Let's try that one more time. Might be because it's new plastic. Yeah, there we go. Just had to push it a little bit. New fan, new plastic, never had a screw in it before. Your fan might be like that too, might not. But if it gives you a little bit of resistance, just a little hair of force will do the trick. Don't want to push on it too hard, obviously. If you have to force it too much, you might have the wrong screw, but just takes a little bit of force. So now what we'll do is we will get ready to put this back on. So we'll do it this way. Now for doing the thermal paste on a laptop CPU, I typically like to do a bit of a line. Everyone does it a bit differently. Some people just do a dot. This is Arctic MX4 in case you're curious what paste is good. Most thermal pastes out there you can use on just about anything, but MX4 has always been a staple for good paste. You just want to use a little bit and just do a small line. Now that small amount will spread out once the heat spreader is tightened down onto it. I could have gotten it centered a little better, but that will work just fine. So now, let's get back to our screwdriver, put the normal size bit back on. And this is numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, so you do want to tighten it down in that pattern. I normally like to do 3 turns on each one for the first pass, just to get it started. Then I will snug it down the rest of the way on the second pass. You don't need to put a lot of force into your tighten, just enough so you know it's snug. And let's get this fan plugged back in. If you have big fingers like myself, you might need to use tweezers. Come on. These vertical connectors are always a bit of a pain, at least for me. Might be a skill issue, I'm not entirely sure. Well, it was definitely a skill issue that time because it would appear I was trying to plug it in backwards. But we've got it now. We are good to go. See, except now I'm second guessing myself. I just want to make absolutely sure. Yep, that is correct. We are good. So now let's get this reassembled. Move this out of the way. Goes back together the same way it came apart. You just open this up. Fan goes in facing down. So let's get that. Make sure this cable is routed correctly, otherwise it might give you issues later. So goes in over here. Point it down a little bit so you can push it in all the way, and then you'll be able to put it down just like that. Now let's reroute that cable like I said earlier. Sometimes cables might get stuck on things. You can use tweezers to get it unstuck. Just try not to stab through it, because that'll give you issues that you really do not want to have. Oh yes, you do also have posts like this, plastic posts that just slide in for lining it up. You want here and here, you want to make sure both of those go through. Otherwise you'll have problems later when you're trying to put it back together. Just like the chassis, the screw for the motherboard here is the same size as pretty much all of the other ones. Once again, you don't need to worry about putting screws in the wrong place or anything like that. So you want to make sure you get this power cable, power port connector plugged back in. The port is on the bottom of the motherboard. If for whatever reason you have trouble trying to plug it back in with the motherboard in, you can always pull it out, plug it in, and then reinsert the board. That might be a little more tedious than just plugging it in with the board seated, but whatever works for you. That's what matters at the end of the day. And we are good here. We are ready to start reassembling it. So first, let's put the top back on. Make sure that everything is good. I think we are. The trackpad cable, it does like to flip down, so what I like to do is I like to just hold it up. That way it doesn't do that. I don't have to fish it out with tweezers later. The palm rest will only go on one way. It'll kind of fall into place. And then you want to just press it down, clip it into place, all the spots. Looks like a clip might have broken over here, but that's nothing the bottom screws won't fix. Yeah, and that's another thing about laptop repair. If one or two clips breaks on you, generally speaking, with most laptops, it's not going to be the end of the world. Especially on older ones, because you have screws everywhere, it will tighten down, it will close the gap. On some newer laptops, especially at the front, if your clips break, you might have a gap left there, in which case you need to replace either the whole bottom case or the whole palm rest, depending on where it broke. That always sucks. It's a fact of life, but generally speaking, the slower you are, the more gentle you are, the less likely you are to break a clip. So now, let's get those 4 screws back in. Doesn't matter what order you put them in. Now, you don't want to try to put a screw here, it won't go anywhere. That screw actually comes in from the bottom, it screws into the keyboard to hold it in place. And also, I didn't mention it, but obviously you want to make sure you plug in all these cables again before you close it up, otherwise you're going to be wondering why nothing's working. Come on. And as Louis Rossmann says in some of his older videos, I'm not sure if he says it in his newer ones, haven't seen them in a while, no screw is left behind. You want to make sure you don't have any screws left over, at least if you're trying to do a good job. We've got all of them in on the top, so now we can plug in the keyboard. These flexes can be a little annoying sometimes to plug in, but not the end of the world. Then it has these tabs on the bottom, it slides in like this, and then presses in at the top. Now, in some areas, you might need to use a little bit of pressure to get it to snap in properly, but it will go down. If it's not snapping in, you'll see what I did there just now is I actually slid it forward a bit because it was in too far back, and then it will start clipping in. Once you've made sure it's in all the way everywhere, you close this up, flip it over, and first thing that I like to do is screw the keyboard in just to make sure I don't have to deal with that again anymore. So let's go ahead and get that. And now, before I put in the rest of the screws, I will put the components back in. So let's do that. Now with your RAM, obviously you do want to try to keep the same sticks in the same ports. If that's not possible, because you just forgot where you put them, it's not the end of the world. You'll just have a bit of a longer startup the first time you turn it on because it has to retrain the memory. But it's nothing to worry about. Alright, let's get that screw for the Wi-Fi card. Yeah, the Wi-Fi card, I don't know if I mentioned it earlier, is the only component on the outside that actually has a different sized screw from everything else. So you just want to make sure you get that correct. Now these coaxial cables, they are for the antennae. They're a bit finicky to press down, but once you get them, they snap right on. You might not always hear the snap, but if you're doing it with your finger, you'll definitely feel it. There we go, we heard it on that one. So now that that's done, last thing to put in is the hard drive. Like I said at the beginning of the video, I will be upgrading him to a solid state drive later. I just don't have it on hand right now. Now we'll go ahead and we will just put all of these screws back in, put the battery in, and we'll boot this up to see, and we should not get a fan error anymore. Let's spread out these screws, make it a bit easier for me to pick them up. Some of them got partially magnetized, they want to stick to each other. That's always annoying. Okay. We are now ready to put that panel back on, so let's go ahead and do that. Double check, make sure you've got all your screws, because otherwise you have to take it off. Looks like we are good. So pretty much just line it up. I don't actually remember how I put this back on last time. How did this go on? Okay, yeah, so I was right, it does slide in. So line it up until it goes down, and then slides in. That also means the way I opened it earlier was wrong. You don't pry up here, you actually push it back. I'll just get the battery on. We should be good. Let's power this up. Battery should have a charge. If not, I'll plug it in. Let's power this on. See if everything worked out. Yep, battery does have a charge. You're booting up. And I am not getting any fan error. So, there you go. This laptop is fixed. Fan replaced. Now you know how to do it. Hope you enjoyed the video and my poor commentary. I'll see you in the next one.